Designer, entrepreneur, and style icon, Vera Wang has shaped the world of fashion over the last 3 decades. From A-list weddings to red carpet events, she has dressed many of the biggest celebrities.
Fashion represents creativity, joy, fun, magic.
She started with a single bridal boutique in New York and went on to pioneer a lifestyle empire, becoming the biggest Asian American name in high fashion.
When you're dressed in the human body, that's probably the greatest artistic challenge that any artist face.
As the child of Chinese immigrants, she speaks about the rise in anti-Asian hate across America.
It is a world where I have been personally a bit shocked.
And high fashion in China.
I think that you have many, many Vera Wangs within China already.
In this episode of Talking Post, we sit down with the one and only Vera Wang for a candid chat about her fashion legacy, Chinese roots, and more.
I'm one of the dinosaurs. I'm not a pioneer, I'm a dinosaur.
So Vera Wang, thank you very much for coming on this show. I haven't spoken to any fashion icons, so it's a real pleasure. Let me admit something here first. So our office is in a commercial building, and it's attached to a shopping mall. It's a high-end shopping mall, and there are a lot of big brand names. Every time I walk past some of these shops, the stuff that they have displayed on the windows, on the mannequins.
That's a big mall, though, I know it.
Some of it looks so outlandish. I mean, it makes me wonder who buys this stuff and who wears this, because seriously, if you lift something off the shelves there, off that mannequin and wear it, you look like a cross between, Willy Wonka and the Pied Piper of Hamlet.
I don't want to alienate my entire industry, but I have to say that, there's some people say fashion is not art. I don't agree. I think when you're dressed in the human body, that's probably the greatest artistic challenge that any artist face. And I know that so much of it is experimental, so much of it is brand building. There is so much competition globally. There is so much out there. And I think in order to distinguish yourself from everyone else, you really you only have a minute or a second to catch someone's eye. And that's what I think motivates a lot of designers, particularly young designers today. They're trying to stand out and they're trying to make an impression in a very, very crowded marketplace. And I think for someone as seasoned as I am, how many years I've been in fashion, I'm always trying to create something that perhaps is more reflective as a woman designer for myself. And I was a fashion editor at American Vogue for almost 20 years. And so I understand from what you're saying to me and what you do that it may seem very odd to you, but actually so much of fashion at the time today, these big companies exist, were once considered extremely avant-garde 30 or 40 years ago. What they did was unheard of. And as time passed, they became the status quo. And now it's a lot of young rebels and young people that are dying to change that whole dichotomy. So it's really a lot to see, because fashion very much reflects how we live. And if you're in fashion, if you can't adapt, you can't survive.
Expanding on that, when you're talking about younger talent with a different mindset, more in keeping with the times and technology, etc.
Or more experimental even. I'm just freer, more experimental. They're not living with rules. Yes, and rules and business strategies that we had to deal with, certainly growing the company from scratch. I mean, it was a very different time. For me, it was 32 years ago. And during those 32 years, fashion has changed more than it did for the prior 50. I was also a figure skater. And
that's right. Before you went into fashion, that was your passion, right, in the beginning?
Yes. I was a single figure skater. In the last 2 years of my skating career, I did pairs. And the Chinese have the greatest pairs to me in the world. I mean, just incredible Olympic champions. I mean, they do things that nobody could ever dream of. But then again, there's a change. That happened the last 20 years. That was not the case before. So someone always has to pioneer. Some generation has to dare. And I think certainly it comes more easily or readily to younger people because they don't have the experience of loss yet or failure. And I think certainly someone of my generation, I've been more defined by failure than I have by success. I mean, I did not make the Olympic team, which was heartbreaking for me. I went to Vogue magazine. I was not considered for editor-in-chief after I'd been there for almost 20 years. I went to Ralph Lauren as a design director. And in every one of these cases, I felt very honored to be in the world of skating. I felt very honored to be an editor at Vogue. I felt very Chinese. I felt very honored to work for Ralph and to be trusted by him. He could have anybody, and I was one of the lucky people to work for him. So that kind of humility is sincere. It's not made up. But by the same token, one can be considered maybe less aggressive or more patient, which is very Chinese to me, and my upbringing anyway. And I think that, maybe in some cases it held you back, and in other cases maybe it was a wise decision. Chinese culture is so old and so refined with so many things that are transgenerational. And I think to see today the young people in China, Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, wherever I am, Chengdu, when I'm there, I've seen this transition over the last 15, 18 years.
You're one of the pioneers, but from your assessment, your point of view, and your...
I'm one of the dinosaurs. I'm not a pioneer, I'm a dinosaur.
Okay, I would never use that word. So let's stick to pioneer. Right now, the current talent that you have in this part of China, Asia, why don't we have another Vera Wang from it? Do you see that happening? Another great talent emerging here?
I think you do already. I think there are designers in China that have been working for quite a long time. Let's be very frank. The clothing you speak about that is so-called wearable or that relates to people's daily lives has been produced enormously by China in Shenzhen, Hong Kong originally. And I think that they've been able to be exposed to manufacturing in a way that perhaps nowhere else in the world could do, and for a very, very long time. So much of what we all wear around the world is made in Chinese factories. I'm not speaking about the couture in Paris. I'm not speaking about ready-to-wear in Italy. I'm not speaking about the very avant-garde fashion attitude out of London or the American market, which is very sportswear and lifestyle oriented. I'm really speaking about the most upper end where you see things that you don't relate to because they're there for a reason. They're there to push that envelope of design further. But China has that talent. It exists, and the education on the other side of manufacturing. I have met many young couples in China that have developed incredible homegrown companies, things that have been astonishing to me. And what you're speaking of is the stars of maybe the uppermost end in China. And with all of that experience, that is already coming to you. It's already happening. It just takes time for it to be internationally recognized.
So we haven't seen the full potential.
Well, I started in America, so it's very different. I can't really, and I also had I had two very serious careers prior to starting my own company. I was 40 when I started my own company. When I was a young woman, when I was 18, 19, you could not buy French clothes in the United States. It was unavailable. There was no distribution. You had to go to Paris. And I was lucky enough to be able to go so I could see Saint Laurent, or I could see Dior, or I could see Valentino. I could see those, I could visit those palaces of luxury with my mother. But it was not available to everyone. Fashion at the upper end was a very elitist business. And the world changed. And that's a good thing, because now people have access to so much more visually, culturally, intellectually, financially, in every way. And that's why I'm saying that Vera Wang, I don't know Vera Wang. I think that you have many, many Vera Wangs within China already. And I think the fact maybe that what you're all, I'm sure, hoping for, that it translates into global. Because we are one world now, and it's a smaller world than it's ever been before. And fashion is a world it entertains the whole world. It provides creativity. It provides an escape. It provides a sense of fun. It provides some individuality. Women and men today can dress however they wish to dress, whether it's your well-cut jacket that you're wearing today and a shirt, a blue shirt without a tie. Without a tie, I have to say to you,
you're critiquing
that would
me,
not have
okay.
been possible 20 years ago. And as a host, as a talk show host, and
Hey Vera,
fashion.
hey Vera, come on. You just talked about my so do I meet your approval
Yeah,
here?
I did.
Is that okay? Is that okay?
You look great.
Thank
I think you
you.
look great.
I'm
No,
completely
you're
flattered. You made
classic.
my night.
You're not trying to shock and all, but because of that, there's a certain modernity in that as well. I mean, fashion can be viewed from so many different perspectives, and timing is everything. When you nothing has never been done. There's not one thing anyone designs that has never, ever been done. In the future with new materials, people always ask me 20 years ago, how will fashion change? And I said, when we develop new materials, cannot be, a sewing machine cannot make it. You may be able to have to use a certain kind of glue, a certain kind of bonding machines. Technology is going to change fashion. It's not the sewing machine that we all grew up with that's everywhere in the world that manufactures clothing, ourselves included. That's there for now, but that will not be the future. Molded clothing, clothing that protects people from the sun and the climate and other things. I saw that 25 years ago. And as people get fitter and people live a different lifestyle, so will the clothing transform. I used to embarrass my daughters because I wore leggings. I'm in right now Adidas workout clothes and my own t-shirt. And the reason I say that is because my one daughter's only 28. She was horrified 20 years ago that I would pick her up at school in leggings. She said, please don't come to school looking like that, Mom, because none of your mothers look like that. So already in this 20 years, the world is completely in athletic-ish clothing. I mean, that's what fashion's about. Fashion is about change. It's not about what was, it's about what will be. And that's what makes it so fascinating, but that's what also makes it so challenging. It's extremely difficult. It involves a lot of funding. Financing fashion is not an easy game. It's not for the faint of heart. It's extremely expensive. You have to get to places where you can sell enormous quantity of goods and distribute it, manufacture it. All of these things are not really taught in design schools today.
China, how important is this market for you compared with the Western market?
My late father would always hope that I could get back to China and really, in a way, shift my focus to China. He passed after, China was opened up, and it made him very, very happy to see China or to revisit China. And I think that was one of the most happiest moments of his life. And I know that I've tried many times to sort of pivot the focus of our business to China. We are in China. We're in China in a very, very elite bridal business, which I have Chinese partners, and we have retail. But again, it's a very exclusive price point, so it's not something that can reach everyone. But I've not ever penetrated China in terms of ready-to-wear or sportswear, or as you would say, the more understandable clothing, perhaps, clothing that is more less fashion aggressive or fashion forward and wearable.
You have spoken out in the past about the unpleasantness recently with the anti-Asian hate going on. Have you experienced that personally as well? How has it been for you there?
I think that when I grew up in America, it was after World War II. The Chinese were allies with the Americans. My father was celebrated when he came to America because he wore a Chinese uniform. And I remember he was just so filled with gratitude and optimism when he came to America with my mother as immigrants, that there was an opportunity here for them. And that was what was so great about coming to America, because it was a time of happiness and joy and celebration and positivity, and the world was going to just explode after being at war for so long. And at the same time, I'm Chinese. Both my parents are Chinese from mainland. And my heritage is one of hard work, respect for elders, achievement, humility, the things that I'm very proud I had. And so I feel, as I hope everyone would, that I'm sort of a combination of both cultures, and I have respect for both. But it is a world right now where I have been personally a bit shocked, because I think that I didn't realize what had evolved perhaps in the last 6 years. And that, like many immigrants, very much, they sought out each other for comfort and support. I think there was a safety in that. But as time has evolved and the world has become one planet, so to speak, more so now than ever, I think a lot of these perhaps acts of aggression are maybe a lack of understanding of who all the different people are, all the different cultures that make up America. And I think the more communication there is, the more understanding, the more care and love and respect there will be. And maybe just because you don't look the same or your background is different, it doesn't mean there isn't a commonality that exists now for the whole planet.
Okay, we've reached the end of our time here, but I have one last question for you, which is what's next for Vera Wang? What can we expect?
Well, I've always looked ahead, just the way I am. You know, when I failed at skating, I went to fashion. I've been in fashion and for a long time now, and I think so many different capacities. But I think that as long as I continue to learn new things, experience new explore other businesses I'm starting to do now, and meeting new people and dealing with different generations, like young people. I think all of that is what makes my life, I think, exciting. I'm not saying not stressful, because it is. But I think as long as I can keep moving and discovering, I think when people say, you know, what keeps you going or what keeps you young, I always believe that being young starts in your head. And if you can keep your mind active and your spirit active, that's the best thing you can possibly achieve.
All right, and amen to that. As for me, I'm going to strut around the office in my Vera Wang approved suit and shirt combination.
You look very elegant. You really do. It's a nice relief to not always see people in black like I usually am. But I mean, no, I think it's kind of new looking in a weird way. It's, you know, it's everything old again. I find it very refreshing.
And I'll say you're looking great too. So thank you very much, Vera, for joining us. We'll chat again some other time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.